Well, everybody, it's another Conversations With, and I'm delighted to have my good friend John Paul, who's with me today. And as we know, John is with AAA. And before we finish the program today, because I got a plethora of things to talk about that are exciting, but I want to talk about that because one of the things that amazed me is the number of people who I've seen, especially with this winter that we're having, with temperatures up one day and down the next, and as even now, the automobiles aren't mechanical anymore. They're almost all computerized, and they run in a whole different. They're all electronic.
Oh, sure, yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And people who do not have AAA, I scratch my head. And it's because, boy, if you have, especially with multiple automobiles, where if you got a couple of kids and there's 3 cars in the house.
Yeah, give them all AAA memberships, and we talk about it a lot with kids and with anybody really. If I'm in your car and your car breaks down, you got a flat tire, and you don't have AAA, I do, so at least I can call up and say, hey, I got a flat tire, and I'm in this car, and they'll come over and they'll take care of it. So not to be too self-promotional, but that's one of the reasons I've been there for 30 plus years, because we have a good product.
But that's the point, John. You know, it's not something that you'll never use. How many people can say, I never had a flat tire?
Yep.
How many people went out on the first brutally cold November morning and got rup for the first time?
Yep. Well, I can tell you a lot. about 70% more than we usually see on a normal morning. So a lot of people do forget, and part of the reason is cars today when they run well, they run perfect.
Yeah.
And it's not like the old days where you could feel your car starting to run a little worse, worse. Didn't start quite as good.
No.
But now with all the electronics, like you said, all the electronics in the car, there's more electronics in your car than there is in the space shuttle. Yeah. When this first space shuttle didn't have as much electronics in it as your car does.
That's right.
So you look at that and you say, well, if my car has more electronics than a space shuttle or a 727, who's going to fix it? How do I get it fixed? But yeah, you're right. And the thing that happens is people sort of forget a little bit until their car breaks down, and then all of a sudden they're panicked because they don't have AAA or they don't have a good mechanic even that can come out and help them if they have a problem. Absolutely.
So that's important.
Thank you.
But anyway, I was telling some people the other day, and I think you'll enjoy the story. It was at church, as a matter of fact, over the weekend, about the program. And and one of the gentlemen was in the little group we were chatting. I got a question, and he said, because I'm wrestling right now with, do I trade my car in? Because I love this car.
Yeah.
Well, I gave him, when he said he loves his car, I said, no, you love your wife, you love your kids, it's a car.
Yeah.
You don't love your car. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, a lot of people love their cars. A lot of people love their cars.
He said, I forget how many years. He said, at what point in time do I start sending good money after bad? He said, I'm at the point where I've had to do this and I've had to do that. And I said, well, no, brakes and tires, that's normal wear.
That's normal wear and tear.
But and windshield wipers, I'm not worried about it. No, he says, but, it's getting to a point now where he says, that transmission's noisy, and I know I'm faced with that baby, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, then that's the problem. I said, if your car is now a 10-year-old car, the last time they made a transmission for that car was 10 years ago. I said, so you're going to go buy a used transmission. How do you know when you're going to get a used or a rebuilt?
It's always a hard question to answer. But in general, it's always cheaper to fix an old car than it is to buy a new one. So if you have a car that you've had it for, the average car on the road today, the average, is almost 12 years old when you factor in cars and trucks together. So people are keeping their cars a lot longer. In fact, they're keeping them longer than they ever have because they are more dependable. Yeah. But at 10 or 11 or 12 years old, your car isn't worth a whole lot of money. But if you said, well, I'm going to go out and buy the cheapest new car out there, you're probably going to spend $18,000 for the cheapest new car out there.
That's right.
For $18,000, you can put a lot of repairs into your car. But the difference is, if at some point, if you say it's time to replace this car, is it dependable? Well, it's not dependable, but I can spend money and I can make it dependable. Is it as safe as the new cars out on the road today? Probably not, because you can get a lot more safety features today than you can. One of the things that really makes people usually trade cars is they get tired of looking at the same steering wheel for 5, 6, 7, 8 years in a row, and they're driving down the road and they're like, I'm kind of getting tired of this car, and so it's time to move on. But yeah, if you're doing mechanical things, like you said, the transmission, well, you can get a rebuilt transmission that the only thing original in it is the case itself. Yeah. So it has all new wear parts, all new bearings. So it's essentially a brand new transmission in an old box. So you can get, $4,000, you can get a new transmission. $5,000 or $6,000, you can probably get a new engine. Yeah. So you say, well, I got most of the big things covered. Mechanically, you can always do a fair amount of things. It's when the body of the car starts to go. Yeah. When it starts to rust and rot, and surface rust is one thing. You look at it, you got a couple holes and rusty spots. You can but when it starts to be structural, you'll spend tens of thousands of dollars to try to fix structural repairs. And at that point, you have to say, I have this 10, 12-year-old car, I'll put $5,000 into it, and maybe I'll get another 3 or 4 years. But if you have a 10 or 12-year-old car and you say, well, it's going to need a transmission, and they put it up on a lift and they go, yeah, but it's also the frame starting to rot out, or the subframe starting to rot out. And yeah, we can fix it, but it's only going to be temporary, because most of the time a rust repair, unless it's done really, really well, is always going to come back to haunt you a few years later. So when it starts to look at structural issues, and we're starting to see that, the amount of stuff we put on the roads today so they don't freeze. It used to be we put sand down, then we put salt down. Now we put sodium chloride down, and that tends to be really aggressive against iron and steel, and it really is causing some rust in cars that we've never seen before. Right. So when you put those chemicals on the road and you combine it with age and sand and salt and moisture on the roads, and we don't think about it, but we're close enough where we get salt air from the ocean and all of that. You put all those together, and that's when it's time to get rid of it. Yeah. Like I said, you can always look at a car and say, well, I had to put $2,000 into the steering and this much into the engine, and it's still a whole lot cheaper than a new car, and it might get you another few years without payments, but when it starts to get structurally bad, then it's time to get rid of it.
Well, the other thing, too, I do a program with an investment banker at the end of the month.
Yep.
Michael Carnival is his name, one of our very popular programs. And we always talk during that program. And Michael points out, as an investment banker, if you watch, in fact, if it wasn't for automobile industry, television would go bankrupt.
Yeah.
I mean, there's five or six in a row. He says, they're begging you to take a new car. Mm-hmm. They're offering 0.9, 1.9.
Sometimes zero.
Yeah, sometimes 0%. He says that some of those Subarus that are $24,999 are an incredible buy.
Right.
I mean, it's an incredible, and so they're begging you to take a new car, and they're almost giving them away.
Right.
And so to that point, but to your point, especially in this area, and you mentioned the roads, you drive your car, and just take the last 35 or 40 days of the weather that we've experienced here in New England.
Yeah, we got some winter.
And all that up underneath that car,
yeah. Oh, sure,
you never see. Yeah. And it sometimes just sits up there all day long, and in fact, the first really cold, that morning it went down to like, wind chill was like 8 below.
Right.
I have that electronic shifting in the Mercedes. And I hit the little thing to go down, it didn't move. I went, and so my wife ran in and got on the computer, and it says, let the car warm up for about 25 or 30 minutes, and it will do it. So we just let the car warm up, and it started to work. But that first panic, I can't shift, and so all of those things, and it's really interesting because you can sit in a situation where you can ultimately start pouring a lot of money into a car that's no longer you couldn't get your money back in 100 years.
No, and it's absolutely, if you have to look at certain things, but sometimes they look at payments, and people today are financing cars longer than they ever have. 7-year loans on cars, 8-year loans on cars.
But then what they don't realize is about the 4th year in, they're upside down.
Oh yeah, and they don't have.
And then they can't get out.
Yep, and that's why your financial investor would probably say, buy a 1-year-old car, let somebody take the first 20 or 25% depreciation on
Yeah.
it, and then you have a car that's almost brand new.
Yeah.
It's got most of the warranty left on
Right.
it, and you don't really need to worry about it. And and there are a lot of people that only.
Well, I'll give you an example. My wife, Jen's car, she has a 2015 C300 4MATIC.
Yep.
Loaded. Backup camera.
Yeah,
it whistles Dixie. If
Yep,
anybody
yep,
comes
yep.
near it, it toots a horn
Yep,
and
yep.
keeps her moving and everything.
Yep.
Great car. She loves it. She's got 34,000 miles on it. Way low. Still has the original warranties on
Yep.
it. And she saw these in 2017. They came out with a little two-door.
Yep.
A coupe, C300 coupe. Loves it. Perfect for her.
Yep.
She, can't wait to get one. And they're starting to come in. A lot of them are coming back on leases.
Right.
Well, I saw one the other day, 7,200 miles on it.
Yep.
It's already 2.5 years old. Okay? There's the car that you can go in. You can buy that car. You can get a great deal on it.
Yep.
And she puts about, 8,000 miles a year on a car. She works nearby here.
Yep.
And so, perfect for her.
Yep.
And she'll drive it for 2 or 3 years, put that much mileage
Yep.
on it. It's still way low.
Yep.
The dealer will take it in
Take
2
back. Oh,
seconds.
sure, yeah.
He can sell that
Yeah,
like this.
And it's funny too. It's people think of Mercedes and other luxury cars.
Yeah.
Mercedes, same thing. They don't hold their value that well in that first year or so.
No, they don't.
And in fact, someone wrote to me this week, and they said, "Is it really worth buying a Cadillac anymore?" And I said, and they said, "Well, I went out and bought a 2017 brand new Cadillac XTS."
Yeah.
And he said, "I paid $59,000 for it. I went to see about trading it in, and I was offered $31,000 for it." And he said, where did all the value go?
Yeah.
And I said, well, you don't have to feel bad, because I looked up a Mercedes E-Class,
Yeah.
a BMW, and I said, those are right up there as far as losers in the first year or so,
Yeah,
too.
right.
So if you can wait a little bit and get something that's a year or so old, and you don't mind not, some people just, sometime in their life, I guess, everybody should buy a brand new car.
Yeah.
See what it feels like to be the
Yeah.
first person that's ever sat in it. Enjoy it, because you're the first one that ever programmed the radio.
Yeah.
Everybody should do that once.
Yeah.
But do you really need to do that? Not really. How do you feel the first time you get in your car and you notice a little dent or a ding? You feel terrible. Well, if you get it with a little dent or a ding, you don't think much of it.
No,
So it's fine. So for a lot of people, they can
Yeah.
used car is a great way to go. But going back to your original question, at what point do you spend too much money on a car? Yeah, you have to look at it and say, if my car payments are $350 a month, I work with somebody whose car payments are $650 a month. I don't know how they can afford to do it. But even half of that, 300 and some odd a month, and over the course of a year, you're gonna spend $3,500 for car payments.
Yeah.
And if you have a fully paid for car that's 6, 7, 8 years old, and you had to put $3,000 or $4,000 into it, that's a year's worth of car payments. So
Right.
for that, you can say, well, it still makes sense to do that if I can get another couple of years of trouble-free miles out of it. Back years ago, when I first came to work at AAA, we had something called the AAA Auto Diagnostic Center. And what it was a little 2-bay shop that people used to bring their cars to me, and I used to tell them what kind of shape they were in. Or if they were going to buy a used car, we'd look
Right.
at that. But part of what it was you would bring your car to me, and I'd look at it and go, Dick, I think this still has another couple of good years left in it.
Yeah.
Or else I'd look at it and go, it's got this wrong, it's leaking here, it's doing
Yeah.
this, it's got this wear here. Or else sometimes it was just like, I don't know how to say it, but it just feels worn out.
Yeah.
There's nothing really terribly wrong with it. It just feels like it's getting old,
Yeah.
and maybe it's time to start to think about a new car. So we did that until we moved our office to Providence, Rhode Island. But we had that, and we probably looked at 100 cars a week for 15 years. So we looked at a lot of cars,
Yeah.
and just try to help people. So I used to say to people, if you're not sure, go to your mechanic where you trust. Go to your repair shop where you trust, and say to them, hey, look, I'm in between. I don't know. Should I keep it? Should I
Right.
get rid of it? What should I do? And just kind of look it over. Tell me how you think it's doing.
Yeah.
And if they say to you, you know what, I think it's maybe time